Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Call this meeting of the TABC to order. The first agenda item is the call to order. It is 1:02 p.m. on Tuesday, May 19th, 2020, and we have a quorum. Welcome, everyone. You all look fantastic. And I hope you know that the screen behind me is virtual. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to read a bit of a prepared statement as we continue to go through these unprecedented, which the term unprecedented seems to be becoming more of a precedent. But on behalf of all of us at the Commission, the men and women of the TABC, thank you for joining us during this virtual meeting. We're coming to you today from the fine city of Houston, Texas, my home, which is the largest city in Texas and one of the greatest cities in the United States. Here and across Texas, thousands of hardworking business owners have closed their doors, putting aside their financial health in order to support the physical well-being of all of us. It's been, in a word, heartbreaking. Yet hope is on the horizon. And under the leadership of Governor Abbott and his public health task force, thousands of Texas restaurant owners and retailers have been able to reopen and serving their customers while complying with the strict guidelines intended to protect the health of employees and the public alike. In addition, this Friday finally sees, at long last, the reopening of Texas bars, wine tasting rooms, craft breweries, and similar businesses. I don't think it's an understatement to say that Texans have been dreaming of this day for weeks. All of us at TABC are excited to work with our industry leaders as well as business owners as we continue the process of reopening Texas. This has been a long road for the industry. Even so, I'm proud to say that TABC has yet to take formal action against any licensed establishment for failing to follow the state's guidance during this pandemic. This tremendous cooperation that we've received from a business and an industry that's been in crisis has truly been unprecedented. Their willingness to collaborate in this effort to bring Texas back and to honor the wishes and desires of the public health officials in the governor's office, I think have been truly extraordinary. They understand the importance of protecting the public health, and they recognize the fiscal costs that they are incurring, some of which we certainly have yet to grasp. Since this pandemic began, TABC has committed its resources to assisting our alcoholic beverage industry partners during the crisis. Our 600 plus employees are working statewide to answer questions and find solutions to the problems facing our industry. We're also working with the industry trade groups, as you know from our last meeting, and the Office of the Governor to find ways to safely restart the retail economy. With TABC, we'll continue to serve in the front lines alongside each of you and to support this incredibly important $40 billion industry until the crisis has ended. Today's meeting is part of that effort. In a few moments, you're going to hear about just some of the steps the TABC has taken to help keep the industry in operation during the COVID-19 lockdown. As you hear these reports from the agency leadership, please don't hesitate to use the online meeting chat features to submit your questions. I also invite everyone to continue to check our TABC coronavirus information page regularly for the latest, most accurate information concerning the industry. Page is updated with new information as soon as it becomes available, and it is a trustworthy source for the latest guidelines and instructions. I'm going to say it again now, 3 times. This crisis is absolutely unprecedented in our lifetime. Perhaps not since 1918. Yet we will prevail. Throughout hurricanes, terrorist attacks, and worse, Texans have shown that we are resilient. We can turn to each other for help, and I have no doubt we'll continue to witness the incredible will as we defeat this crisis and resume the lives we deserve. We have a lot to be proud of as Texans, and I think that we continue as a state and as an agency to lead from the front. We set the standard for the rest of the country. And everyone on this call is at the forefront, the tip of the spear in making this happen. And so I recognize that all the commissioners, all the employees, and everyone that is going through their own personal sacrifices, both at home and at work, to try to keep our state safe and to keep this industry vibrant. The challenges facing everyone here have been extraordinary. And I know all of you, everyone on the phone call, is dealing with your own individual issues, and in some cases, sadly, some crises that affect your family, your neighborhood, your communities. So I'm just humbly grateful for all of you, for all my fellow commissioners, for all the employees, agents, and people associated with this agency and the industry. I'll now turn it over to my fellow commissioners for any words before we begin today's meeting. So please, any of you who have anything to say, please, we'd love to hear from you. How about El Paso? How are we doing out there in the West?
We're doing good. We're doing good, Chairman Lilly. I appreciate it. We've actually delayed our opening per the request of local leadership. So we're going to be a week behind in the opening of the bars and the expansion of restaurants from 25% to 50%, just based upon how we're seeing things happening here. So a week behind, but we're going to be excited to be opening very soon.
Great, great. Dallas, Texas, Commissioner Boatwright, how are we doing up there?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think we're ready to reopen. I think the bars are ready to get going at 25%. Hopefully, it's better than nothing, and ready to go back to work.
Outstanding. Commissioner Marino from the Alamo City, my true hometown. How are we doing there?
We're doing very well. As a matter of fact, today is my first day back in the office, and we're obviously at 25%. So at least I now have some decent background. I apologize for my last two calls. Literally in my son's room, I think, trying to balance the phone calls and Zoom meetings and everything. But I do want to say, Commissioner Lilly, the statement that you read was absolutely on point. And I just feel that the 600 employees that we oversee have done an exceptional job. And to hear the stat from you to say that there really has not been one incident that we've had to pursue from a local business perspective is really outstanding. And it just shows the willingness for everybody to work together to make sure that we do come out this COVID, the other side, stronger and better. So really just kudos and ditto to exactly what you just said earlier.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Mack.
I echo those statements. I personally am eager to get back out there and to support local businesses, to a nice craft brew. I'm looking forward to it. I've been at home with the kids, as many other Texans have been at home. Daycares have closed, and now they're opening back up again, and so I get some kind of normalcy back to the day. But the one thing that I will say, and I echo this from a online Sunday service that I heard with my wife, there are a lot of positive things that we're going to be able to pull from this crisis. And I think this crisis, we've got to look at some of the positives as it relates to how we can do things better. And I know you guys have already identified ways, and we put things in process to do things better for restaurants and better for our industry. But from here in Austin, we're ready to get back to it. And so we're excited. But thank you for everything that you've done, Chairman, and the other commissioners. I think we're going to have a great reopening. Great reopening.
Well, I think, thank you for that comment. Thank you for all the comments from our commissioners. And I do believe that, we could have gone two ways as an agency during this period, especially as a law enforcement and administrative and a regulatory body. We could have been heavy-handed. And yet we recognize that the industry that we've been tasked to oversee is struggling so much, that there are so many jobs and lives, literally the wellness of so many Texans on the line, that it was the last thing that we needed to do as an agency to start being heavy-handed and kicking down doors and making headlines. And yet I think that there has been no breach of public safety. And I think that the way that General Nettles and all the directors have handled their business has been, I hope, a model for other state agencies, not only in Texas, but throughout the country, as the right way to deal with a crisis. To say we are truly an ally. We're an ally of the people. We recognize public safety, but we also recognize the leverage and the impact of the industry that we're regulating. And so I'm just so proud of everyone. And thank you, commissioners, for your support of everyone here and the entire operation. So well done all. Thank you, General. And thank you for sneezing into your arm. Mr. Chapman, that was well done. Well rehearsed, by the way. So at this time, we're going to get things started. Understanding the individual liberties that we all share, for all those that have given their lives for those individual liberties, as we move into Memorial Day and recognize the tremendous sacrifice that our men and women in uniform have given for over 200 years, for all the crosses, the Stars of David, and the monuments that exist throughout our great country as we come into this Memorial Day weekend. I would like us all to rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next agenda item is approval of commission meeting minutes of April 14th, 2020. I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Commissioner Atkins?
That's correct.
Commissioner, who was that? Atkins. Thank you, sir. We have a second. We will now vote.
Uh-oh.
And don't worry, if you've got any technical difficulties, we're happy to do voice votes.
Joe Mack voting aye. I'm having a few technical difficulties.
Okay. Commissioner Max, aye. Good. All right, we're good. All right. That motion, the minutes are approved as written. As we continue to practice social distancing, we are going to recognize several of our enforcement personnel after this meeting for their outstanding work in Polk County emergency response. Chief Kirkendall is here with us. And is he going to give background now or after? Okay, fine. And Chief, if you would please, if you could give us a little background on this tremendous effort.
Absolutely, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. My name, for the record, is Victor Kirkendall, and I serve as the Chief of Law Enforcement here at TABC. I thank you this day for this privilege to recognize agents from the Houston region for their response to assist the fellow Texans after a deadly tornado hit Polk County. Next slide. So on April 22nd, an EF3 tornado ripped through the community of Onalaska, Texas, which is located just off of Lake Livingston in Polk County. This tornado had wind speeds that reached upwards of over 140 miles an hour, killing 3 people and injuring dozens of others. 2 of those persons killed were actually fellow state employees working for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. This tornado also damaged or destroyed over 300 homes in the Onalaska area. This slide that you see here showed some of the destruction and the tasks being performed of our agents when they immediately arrived to the area. Next slide. So like we typically do in situations where our local agencies may need emergency assistance, we reach out to the local entities. In this case, we reached out to Sheriff Kenneth Hammock and his staff to see if any assistance can be provided by TABC. One of the challenges we found was because we had 300 residents that were displaced and the number of government and non-government agencies that were coming to assist through this relief effort, there was no housing available for our agents if we were wanting to dispatch our special response team or other agents for outside the area. So a decision was made to use agents from both the Lufkin and Conroe and a supervisor from the Houston office that wouldn't require overnight accommodations and could deploy directly from their house to the affected area, provide assistance, and return back to the residents, putting in upwards to 12 to 14-hour days for almost a week. Next slide, please. So during this time, the agents assisted local residents, patrolled neighborhoods for possible leaders, and provided security at relief distribution points. As you can see here, this is some slides of pictures of our agents performing many of those tasks while they were deployed. So we would like to recognize those 10 agents and supervisors: Agents Doug Richardson, Lee Wiggins, Eddie Estevez, Tom Matthews, Michael Quinn, Ray Winkler, Justin Wazell, Oscar Williams, Sergeant James Jones, and Lieutenant Randy Chatham, all from Region 3. Next slide. So just as Chairman Lilly mentioned at the after the commission meeting today, we're going to be presenting them with a TABC Emergency Response Deployment Patch. Now this patch was developed after Hurricane Harvey, where during that event, we dispatched roughly 80% of our law enforcement staff to assist in that effort. And so we had a specifically or specially made patch just for the Harvey deployment. But for our smaller responses, just like the flooding that we had down in the valley about a little over a year ago, and then of course this response here, we have a generic emergency response deployment patch. And as you can see on the bottom part of the circle there, there's a silver star. For each emergency deployment that doesn't have a deployment specific patch generated for, that agent or supervisor will receive one with a star. If it's their second deployment of such a nature, that would have 2 stars. So far we've developed up to 3 stars. Past that, I guess we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do, put more stars in this patch. So this was at the direction of and leadership of General Nettles, bringing forth some traditions from the military, and it definitely is recognizing the great work of our agents in the efforts to help our local citizens and Texans across the state. So that concludes my slides. I'm available to answer any questions you have at this time.
Outstanding. Those of us who live in the Houston area recognize that the Lake Livingston area has been unfortunately prone to some of these disasters, whether it's flooding, and in this case, to add insult to injury, to go through a tornado at this incredibly difficult time was almost too much to bear for those good citizens in Polk County, and for our emergency response team to get there and to basically go to the sound of the guns and be willing to work long hours to help these citizens is, again, another example of our agency supporting our community. So Chief, well done, good job. Commissioners, any questions or comments?
Just thank you and congratulations.
I love the patch. Who designed that?
The agents, sir.
Excellent. Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next agenda item will be an update on the agency's academy. Deputy Division Director Xavier Casares will now give us an update.
Good afternoon, Chairman Lilly and Commissioners. My name is Javier Cáceres, and I have the privilege of serving as the Deputy Director for the training unit. I am presenting on behalf of Director Orlando Salinas today. At the April 14 Commission meeting, General Salinas provided a briefing on the Agent Academy safeguards. General Salinas reported all 25 new agents were commissioned and healthy. I'm happy to report that it remains true today. He also reported we prepared 5 contingency plans for the next Agent Academy to be carried out when it was safe to do so. We have decided on a course of action in which I will brief today. At the March 24th Commission meeting, our Executive Director, General Nettles, briefed on the plan to conduct the Agent Academy at the Austin Community College Public Safety Training Center in Kyle, Texas. That venue, however, remains closed due to the pandemic. We have identified a new training site, the Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service, also known as TEEX. TEEX is located at the Rellis campus in Bryan, Texas. Because TEEX operates their own basic peace officer academy, the location offers all the facilities and equipment necessary to accommodate our Agent Academy. The new dates for the academy are June 1st through July 2nd. We have modified the academy to run 5 weeks. In the 5 weeks, the new agents will receive training in the Alcoholic Beverage Code, firearms training, vehicle operations, and reality-based training in arrest and control tactics. The graduation ceremony for Class A 2020 is scheduled for July 2nd, 2020 at 10 a.m. at the Annenberg Presidential Convention Center at Texas A&M. Next slide, please. We will continue to observe strategies to mitigate exposure to all cadets and instructors. The class will be divided into 2 groups. We will adhere to social distancing guidelines, and virtual instructional media will be utilized to minimize exposure. Additional steps to ensure safety are daily temperature readings of all persons, eye protection, face masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. A similar process was used during the onboarding and commissioning of our new agents this past April. Next slide, please. The Rellis campus, as previously stated, can accommodate all of our needs. Classroom with audio-visual equipment, a reality-based training location, firearms ranges, a driving track, a gym, and a spacious matted room for our arrest and control tactics. Next slide. This slide illustrates one of the firearms ranges. This particular range has 20 shooting lanes. It has shooting distances of up to 80 yards and turning targets. This range can accommodate both our pistol and rifle platform. Next slide, please. This Quonset hut houses a reality-based training location, which is used to train officers in force-on-force situations. This type of reality-based training provides the cadets the ability to train in simulated real-world situations where complex decisions must be made. The facility is equipped with a catwalk, which will enhance the ability of the instructors to properly evaluate each student's proficiency. Next slide, please. The TEEX driving track will accommodate our 32-hour TABC designed fleet vehicle operations course. The photo on the right illustrates a matted training room, which provides additional safety features for our arrest and control tactics. Additionally, TEEX has a fully furnished gym that includes weights and rowers. Next slide, please. Possible legislative dates are scheduled for week 3, which is reality-based training, and week 4, which is our firearms and patrol rifle course. These 2 courses showcase the physical skills required to ensure officer safety and the proficiency of the Texas Peace Officer. Next slide. Our lodging accommodations will be at the Stella Hotel. This locally owned hotel was available at the state rate and is in close proximity to the Rellis campus. The hotel has plenty of outdoor space for physical training and numerous meeting rooms for evening classes and study sessions. During non-operational hours, the cadets will have the opportunity to train at the hotel bar, as it offers a real-life perspective to the training. Our team has done an exceptional job in coordinating the many details of this major training effort. We are in constant contact with our new agents. Class A 2020 is healthy, motivated, and ready to start their new Agent Academy. On behalf of the training division, We would like to thank Chairman Lilly, the commissioners, and General Nettles for their leadership and support in this strategic endeavor. And in closing, our goal is to keep all persons safe and healthy as we prepare the new agents with the education and skills to serve the citizens of Texas. Subject to your questions, this concludes my presentation.
That's a great report. And, you know, I think that we really owe a lot of gratitude to General Nettles, his long and deep relationship with Texas A&M, with Chancellor Sharp, and all those at that great institution really made this become a reality. And for us to have what appears to be a permanent home, we hope, is a breakthrough for us. You know, people have been very gracious with our agency to allow us to sort of temporarily house our academy at various locations, and we are greatly appreciative of the Texas Military Department at Camp Mabry, as well as Austin Community College. But for us to have what appears to be a long-term permanent location for our academy is a game changer. And so General Nettles, well done to all that were involved in that effort. You know, Deputy Director Casares, thank you very much for that great report. Commissioners, any questions? Okay.
Very well
The next,
done. Thank you
I'm
very
sorry,
much.
go ahead, please.
I was just going to say it was very well done. Thank you very much. And I know how difficult it was to not only find a new location or secure a new location, but then also add all of the COVID stuff that you have to do. And it just seems that the men and women that are going through this academy are very eager to join the enforcement. And I really look forward to one day actually maybe going down there and seeing it in person. It just looks like it's going to be an amazing facility. So thank you all for getting this done.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marino, thank you for those comments. I'm right there with you. Road trip sounds like it might be in order. Not that they welcome me at Texas A&M, but if they did.
I'm sure you're always welcome.
I'm sure we
So,
can make a few exceptions.
the next agenda item will be a briefing on the plan to reopen the agency. Director Fletcher, if you please, sir.
Yes, good morning. Can everybody hear
Ma'am,
me?
excuse me.
Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Loud and clear.
Or good afternoon, I should say. Okay, so hi, I'm Amanda Fletcher. I'm the Director of Human Resources. Thank you for having me, Chairman Lilly and Commissioners. Today, I'll be updating you on the agency's plan to reopen TABC offices to the public. Next slide, please. So the current operations, TABC offices have been closed to the public since March 20th, and our offices will remain closed to the public at least through May. TABC staff continues to serve customers, engage with industry, and accomplish daily activities under expanded teleworking arrangements. Next slide. The executive director formed a work group to develop protocols and guidelines for reopening TABC offices to the public with the goal in mind to protect the health and safety of all Texans, but especially our employees and those individuals requiring our services. Work group members included employees within the Human Resources Division, SIPI, and the Communications team, and select members of the regional leadership team. We researched best practices and engaged with other law enforcement agencies to learn their strategies and considerations, as well as coordinated with the State Agency Coordinating Council, and of course our communications team keeps in contact with the governor's office regularly. The work group developed a 3-phased approach, but the timelines of each phase have yet to be determined. In the first phase, we will be reopening our regional offices and headquarters to the public by appointment only. In the second phase, we will reopen remaining area offices and use a phased approach at headquarters to return to standard operations. In the third and final phase, would return TABC to normal standard operations, or at least our new normal. As Texas moves through the process of safely and strategically opening the economy, TABC will adapt these plans to ensure we are doing the best we can to protect the health and safety of all Texans, especially those who are most vulnerable to COVID-19. Next slide, please. TABC stands ready to implement the first phase of reopening our offices to the public when the executive director determines it's the best time. Senior leadership is in constant coordination with the governor's office and state health officials to ensure the timing of our first phase of reopening is in line with their recommendations and best practices. Currently, we don't have a firm date to begin phase 1, but leadership is looking to be in this phase in the next couple of weeks, likely in early June. In this first phase, employees will meet with the public by appointment only while following certain safety precautions. We will open up the headquarters and Austin regional office first as a pilot. It's noted that although headquarters does not receive a lot of traffic from the public, the Austin regional office is located in the same building as headquarters. If all goes well, after a week or so, we will begin opening the other regional offices located in Lubbock, Arlington, Houston, and San Antonio. In this first phase, the primary group of employees impacted will be from the licensing division because a majority of the in-person meetings will be conducted by licensing staff. Audit and enforcement staff were already conducting much of their business with external parties over the phone before the pandemic, and they indicate they would not have a major need for in-person appointment capacity. Therefore, work group members agreed that licensing would require the vast majority of in-person appointment capacity. Next slide, please. So to protect the safety of the public and our team, only certain employees will return to work with limited public interaction in this first phase. Who should return? Employees who are least at risk of the most severe impacts of COVID-19 will make up the first wave of staffing in our offices. Employees who are teleworking solely due to the TABC's direction to expand telework operations in order to provide social distancing during the public health disaster, and those who are less vulnerable should be considered in this first phase. The telework request forms capture the reasons employees are teleworking, so HR will work with leaders to determine which employees are best suitable for being physically present in the office in this first phase. We recognize that circumstances change, so leaders will engage with employees if there's a continued need for teleworking arrangements beyond the public health disaster. So who should not return? Absolutely, employees who are sick or pose a risk of spreading COVID-19 should not be physically present in TABC offices. All employees should be self-screening for any of the possible COVID-19 symptoms in accordance with the health protocols incorporated in the governor's report to Open Texas. These standards will help ensure that individuals can more effectively take responsibility for themselves in preventing the further spread of COVID-19. Employees who have indicated they are higher risk with factors such as age or underlying health conditions, and employees who are unable to find childcare should be considered last to return to the office. Next slide, please. Last month, I discussed with you all the COVID-19 return to work questionnaire that we created. Reminder, its purpose is to evaluate risk associated with allowing an employee to return to the office, especially in the absence of a physician's release to return to work. All employees returning to a TABC office after their temporary telework arrangement ends or another COVID-19 related absence will need to complete the questionnaire. Based on the information provided on the questionnaire, Human Resources and Leadership will evaluate risk and determine when the employee can best return to the office. The criteria used to assess an employee's ability to return to work after a suspected case or confirmed case of COVID-19 is established under the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention interim guidance. We recognize that this guidance often changes and will update this questionnaire accordingly. Next slide, please. So TABC employees are encouraged but not required to wear PPE while in a TABC facility. Employees are permitted to wear their own PPE but should use the best protection available. TABC will make PPE accessible to employees as available and prioritize providing this personal protective equipment to frontline employees. We've defined frontline as those employees expected to provide face-to-face interaction with the public. TABC leaders will make requests for personal protective equipment and cleaning products to the Business Services Division, and our Chief of Staff will prioritize these requests. Frontline employees will receive a welcome back kit, including KN95 masks, gloves, hand sanitizers, and disinfectant wipes or spray. The number of frontline employees and other employees that will make up skeleton crews will be driven by the amount of inventory on hand and availability of cleaning products. Next slide, please. All employees continue to be creative in accomplishing TABC's mission while limiting in-person contact by practicing social distancing to the greatest extent possible using tools like virtual meetings such as this, and limiting in-person contacts. When we move to phase 1 and begin having in-person meetings with the public, these meetings will be conducted with a member of the public in the regional office lobby and licensing staff behind the glass barrier. Each regional office has a lobby area big enough to maintain social distancing and a front desk with plexiglass to separate the employee from the customers. Appointments will be scheduled in advance with one customer at a time in a 25 to 35-minute increment. Regional offices are estimating a maximum of 7 to 9 appointments per day, depending on staffing levels and, of course, customer needs. This will allow the remaining parts of the offices to remain closed to external guests and allow time to clean and sanitize the area before the next customer. We are looking to pilot a temperature check station at the headquarters and Austin Regional Office building. However, visitors will not be required to have a temperature check before entering a regional office. Since the virus can be spread through asymptomatic carriers, and because staff are separated by plexiglass from visitors in regional offices, it presents a greater risk for our employees to come out of the protected area to collect a form or do a temperature check. All employees and customers should self-screen for any of the possible COVID-19 symptoms in accordance with the health protocols incorporated in the governor's report to Open Texas. Supervisors should ensure employees are self-screening daily before reporting to work, and customers will be asked screening questions as they schedule in-person appointments. Next slide, please. Regional offices will have one entry point and exit point for customers. Front doors of the office lobby will be locked to avoid walk-in traffic and enable staff to maintain social distancing and proper disinfecting of surfaces between appointments. We will have signage posted at the front entrance for instructions on how to schedule appointments and detailing social distancing requirements. Lobby areas of regional offices are small spaces, and walk-in traffic would disrupt the ability of regional staff to effectively implement safety procedures. We will continue to educate our employees and provide resources such as CDC guidance on disinfecting workspaces throughout the day and Department of State Health Services health protocols for individuals for self-screening. We are continuing to maintain enhanced deep cleaning services in all of our TABC offices in accordance with the CDC sanitation guidelines. We're doing this at least twice a month. Also, if an employee or customer displays symptoms of COVID-19, the employee will immediately notify HR and their supervisor, and the individual will be sent home. HR, in coordination with the employee, leadership, and medical professionals, will determine the appropriate course of action. Depending on the circumstances, the offices may be temporarily closed for a deep cleaning, and if COVID-19 is confirmed, we will notify all individuals who are potentially exposed, including the local health officials. Next slide, please. So we have a number of employee benefits that are available when an employee becomes ill or unable to work due to COVID-19. Workers' comp, of course, will pay medical expenses and temporary income benefits if an employee is exposed to COVID-19 during the course and scope of employment. Exposure claims are very difficult to determine when they occur, especially tying them to the course and scope of employment. So it's not a guarantee that the State Office of Risk Management will approve these types of claims. We don't approve the claims, our insurance carrier, SORM, does. However, our CPOs have a greater benefit under workers' comp because they're entitled to injury leave that would allow for full pay for time missed from work for a workers' comp injury, opposed to the partial income benefits provided by SORM. Of course, we have the Family Medical Leave Act, or FMLA. This will still protect employees who are eligible for qualifying absences related to their own health conditions or those of immediate family members. To be eligible for FMLA, employees must be employed by the state of Texas for 12 months and must have worked 1,250 hours in the preceding 12 months. I briefed last meeting that the Families First Coronavirus Response Act was signed into law on April 1st, and it is set to expire December 31st. Since the last commission meeting, a policy, process, and leave request form have been implemented, and several employees have already taken advantage of the leave. Organizations do have the option to choose whether or not to exempt emergency responders from the FFCRA law, and our agency leadership determined that our CPOs are exempt so that they can be ready to respond in the event that we're called for a response in this pandemic. This law has two components. The first provides 80 hours of additional paid leave for 6 qualifying reasons. 3 are for their employee's own illness, and they would receive full pay for those. The other 3 are for reasons for caring for others, and they would receive 2/3 pay for those reasons. The second piece of the law expands the FMLA by creating a new eligibility event specifically for employees who are unable to work or telework because of a school or child care facility closure. To be eligible for FMLA under this event, you only have to be employed for 30 days. And another major difference is it's not only a protected status, but it offers that paid leave at the 2/3 rate as well. TABC will continue to encourage employees to telework and take advantage of our temporary telework arrangements whenever possible, and management will make a good faith effort to offer flexibility for employees to the extent doing so is not disruptive to operations. Leadership will continue to be flexible and adapt to agency and employee needs while schools remain closed. Human resources will assist supervisors in determining how to address issues for employees without childcare on a case-by-case basis. Finally, our employee assistance program is always available to assist employees through these difficult times, whether it's offering assistance, finding a child care facility, or providing training and resources, or short-term counseling to navigate through work and personal issues. Next slide, please. So after phase 1 of reopening TABC regional offices is executed and evaluated, the remaining area offices and headquarters will use the phase approach to return back to standard operations. Public office hours will be driven by customer demands and determined by the regional leadership team. The remaining support divisions at headquarters will continue to operate under teleworking arrangements, but will ramp up staff in the office as workload expands and the needs of the agency change. For example, legal staff may increase staff presence for SOA hearings. Human resources may increase staff when we have investigators coming to look at documents. Other support divisions like ITD, communications, and training may slowly increase staff time in the office as the workload increases. These divisions are generally not public-facing departments, therefore a slow return to standard operations of these divisions can be completed during this phase. Management will also evaluate permanent changes that need to be made to standard operating procedures as a result of the pandemic to improve productivity and efficiencies going forward. Please keep in mind that the timelines and plans for all phases of reopening TABC will depend on further direction by the governor. Senior leadership is in constant coordination with the governor's office and state health officials to ensure the timing of our first phase of reopening is in line with their recommendations and best practices. TABC stands ready to implement or adapt our plans when the executive director determines it's the best time. That is all that I have to present today. Are there any questions?
This is Commissioner Atkins. I'd just like to say this is an extremely comprehensive plan. It was obviously well thought out, following best practices that I'm aware of today. And it's such a difficult time for all of us and all employers to balance that safety and work. But I believe the plan you presented is really creating the safest possible environment to reopen. So I just want to applaud you on the work that's been done.
Thank you. It was not a solo effort for sure. The work group was a team effort, and I give kudos to the whole team, the regional leadership team, the communications team, the SIPI team. It's definitely been a group effort.
Director Fletcher, I have just a quick question, and you may have said it, but I may have not heard it clearly. On the what I think is a remarkably generous 10 weeks of paid expanded family and medical leave, is there any sort of process or procedure that one must go through before they can receive that leave?
Yes, so for the FFCRA leave specifically, there's a request form, and they've got to provide supporting documentation that they meet one of those qualifying events, whether they're seeking a diagnosis, if they can provide us a test result. We're being pretty lenient on that as long as we can tie it to one of those qualifying reasons. And then there's a process where we'll coordinate with our business services team to apply the leave balance to their timesheet in our payroll system. And then they use the leave, basically they can, once they're awarded the 80 hours, they'll be able to use it as needed for the rest of the year, the calendar year. For the FMLA side, specifically, we have not had one of those yet, but there will be specific certification requirements, just as there is for all FMLA events. But in the event that, you know, an individual is unable to work or telework due to childcare reasons, we would have to validate that as well.
So do you have a sense of how many of our employees have had to take advantage of the expanded family leave?
Nobody has yet so far.
Okay.
I think there's a small group of, I want to say about 20 or so individuals who've indicated they're teleworking specifically for childcare reasons. So it's a relatively small group, but as long as we can continue to be flexible and ensure that they can telework, I don't expect that we will need to use much of that expanded FMLA, potentially more on an intermittent basis.
Great. Well, you know, childcare is an enormous issue for all of us. And so thank you for your accommodation and thank you for your excellent report. Any other questions or comments for Director Fletcher? All right, having heard none, the next agenda item will be a briefing on communicating COVID-19 info and reopening guidelines to industry. Director Black.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Lilly and Commissioners. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to provide you an update on our communication efforts to both our employees and to our industry stakeholders. Before I jump into the PowerPoint, I do want to echo what Chairman Lilly said, and we're dealing with factors of unprecedented proportion, a new dangerous virus that is a threat to every American, an economy that was forced to shut down. Now, we will recover, but to do this effectively, we must communicate with our employees and stakeholders. Communications is the key to unlocking success. I'm proud to say that we have the team and the leadership from you all to be successful. All right, now we can jump into our slides. On slide 27, our COVID-19 communications response team continues to meet daily to discuss our strategy and tactics for the development and distribution of materials. We are focused on providing accurate and credible information. We continue to receive direction from the governor's office. And as the division director, I ensure our leadership receive daily updates on our actions. On slide 28, you can see our strategy of using 5 tools to continuously push out information to our external stakeholders. We use the website, emails, videos, social media, and the media. They're very effective instruments of getting our message out. On slide 29, I want to specifically point out the effectiveness of our daily emails. Since this pandemic began, we have seen a 74% increase in subscriptions to our email list. Stakeholders appreciate getting updates on a daily basis. Now on slide 30, I want to discuss our internal communication process concerning the reopening plan that Amanda did just a great job of laying out for us. On May 5th, the General held a virtual town hall with nearly 400 TABC employees. He provided them information and answered questions on the reopening plan. Communications and HR continues to send out emails to employees when we have additional information on reopening. We are absolutely focused on ensuring our employees have the information they need. On slide 31, as we get closer to the dates of reopening the agency, we will put out information to our external audiences in several ways. Through a press release, send out an industry notice, post on social media, and include information on the daily email. Now on slide 32, I really want to say a big thank you to you, Chairman Lilly, General Nettles, and all of our commissioners for taking part in our Ready to Reopen video. We captured you all in your hometowns and showed how you're all in touch with your communities and the state. The video turned out great, and we appreciate the time you provided us, and I hope you all can help us continue to create more videos in the future. Finally, on slide 33, we wanted to share some of the industry feedback we are receiving, and that includes praise for all of you, our commissioners. Stakeholders appreciate what you are doing to make a difference. TAB staff is working hard to get information out to our stakeholders and answer questions when they contact us, and we will continue to do the best we can to be transparent, available, and affable to our industry partners. We are focused on providing excellent customer service, and as I said in the beginning, that all begins with effective communications. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioners, any comments? Brian, I wanted to also just personally thank you for behind every public official who has to give public addresses is a great communications director. So thank you for providing me scripts and data points to convey our message thoroughly and efficiently. Also, Chris Porter is somebody that doesn't show up in a lot of these meetings, but he's our head involved in public affairs, head of public affairs. And so virtually all of the public messages that come out from this agency either go through Brian and or Chris. And boy, that is a absolutely essential job. And it's a delicate job. And optics are obviously important. And so thank you guys for all the great work you've done. And thank you, Brian. Well done. Appreciate it.
Very much. I appreciate it. And as Amanda said, we have an amazing team at TABC, and it's definitely a team effort. And thank you.
Absolutely. All right. The next agenda item will be briefing on helping businesses respond to and recover from COVID-19. Director Staples and Deputy Director Colonel Beal. Deputy Executive Director Colonel Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, today I'm going to update you on the current operating status of the alcoholic beverage industry and how TABC is helping businesses respond to the COVID-19 disaster. And as you said, I'll be followed by Colonel Beal, who will cover the recovery aspect of this. So on the next slide, a timeline shows the state's actions that they're impacting the industry during the disaster. Texas is currently operating under a disaster proclamation for COVID-19, and this is what has enabled the state to take action to prevent the spread of the virus, and is what allows the governor to suspend or waive laws and rules that impede the state's response to this public health crisis. And you'll notice the proclamation is repeated on the timeline. This is because the governor must extend the proclamation each month to keep it in place. The proclamation was most recently extended last week on May 12th. And on the next slide, you will see that under the proclamation, Governor Abbott has
Can
issued.
you go back to that slide one time, just for one more second? That's
Sure.
That's really important information. Just want to.
And you'll get to see it again in the presentation too. Yeah,
Okay.
the initial proclamation was March 13th, and then it's been twice extended, May 12th being the last point.
You know, it's remarkable when you see it on a timeline continuum like that, just how much has transpired in such a relatively short time. So thank you.
Definitely. So back to that next slide. Yeah, there we are. So the governor has issued several suspensions of the law under the proclamation, and we discussed all of those during the April commission meeting last month. But the update here is that these statutory suspensions are still in full effect, and they will remain in effect as long as the proclamation is in place or until the governor terminates these suspensions. And just for context, the disaster proclamation for Hurricane Harvey, which was in 2017, that proclamation is still in effect. So it's quite possible that these new abilities from these statutory suspensions could be in place for quite a while. And in addition to the statutory suspensions, as we discussed in April, TABC has taken actions to make several process changes to help industry. And these decisions to make those changes were informed by a robust level of engagement with industry stakeholders. And so on the next slide, I want to point out TABC's level of effort to help industry. So throughout this public health disaster, TABC across all divisions has been actively engaged with businesses. You can see next to each division listed, there's a number that represents the total calls, emails, and other types of contacts that these divisions have had with stakeholders. And this is just since the April commission meeting, so just a month time span, and we've been in this a little longer than that. And in addition to that, at the bottom of the slide, TABC has successfully issued refunds to many holders of temporary event permits if they've had an event that was canceled due to the pandemic. And this is something that's been allowed by one of Governor Abbott's statutory suspensions. But now we are looking forward. As Texas begins to open back up, these engagements are crucial to help both the industry and the agency prepare for what's to come. On the next slide, you'll see the timeline again, but now we're going to highlight the governor's executive orders, which set the level at which Texas can be open. So right now, everyone is required to minimize in-person contacts, except if it's necessary to provide or obtain covered services, which includes essential services like the alcoholic beverage manufacturing and distribution operations, as well as retail operations for off-premise consumption. Other covered services are retail operations that are specifically authorized by an executive order. And these include dine-in restaurant services, as the chairman mentioned at the beginning of the commission meeting. Currently, they are able to operate at 25% of their occupancy, but they'll be able to expand up to 50% occupancy beginning this Friday under the governor's second phase of the state's reopening. And similarly, bars and similar on-site consumption businesses like tasting rooms at breweries, distilleries, wineries, they'll be able to reopen at 25% of their occupancy beginning this Friday. However, the governor specifically mentioned in his executive order that arcades, amusement parks, water parks are still not allowed to operate at this point. But a silver lining is for other businesses, if the current law allows you as a retailer to conduct pickup and delivery transactions, you are able to operate in that way. Just make sure it's under the current law or a waiver that's allowed that kind of activity. So this is what we know for now. TABC will continue to monitor the situation and inform businesses as the status changes for on-premise retail operations. And as the governor takes measured steps to reopen the Texas economy, TABC has a plan to help Texas businesses get back to work and recover long-term. So that's the end of my presentation, and Colonel Beal will take it over for the recovery phase of this, unless there's any questions.
Yeah, before Colonel Beal, before you start, one thing I wanted to mention, and thank you for the effort of Director Staples and his team. Commissioners, I asked Director Staples to put together a spreadsheet. I don't know if you've seen it yet. And what I wanted was to identify kind of the top 10 or so restaurant and or license holders in the respective communities. And so what I'd like to do is sometime in the next week, get that list sent out to you so that you guys, if you want, could reach out to some of these individuals and just offer a word of encouragement, tell them that, we're with us to sort of be back in the original comments of Commissioner Boatwright about a month ago, to try to be transparent and available. Not that you're calling about policy and or changing anything, but also just to let them know who you are. So we're going to be sending that out, and we're going to try to break it up geographically. So we've got the western part of the state covered by Commissioner Atkins, San Antonio and South Texas by Commissioner Marino, Dallas and North Texas by Commissioner Boatwright. And Commissioner Mack, you and I are kind of going to sort of tag team a little bit in Houston. If you'd like, I'd like to give you Austin as well, if you could do that. So Commissioner or Director Staples, if you and Brian and others can sort of refine that list geographically so we can send that out so you guys can, at your time and leisure and convenience, reach out to some of these license holders and just be a word of support, if that works.
We can do that for sure.
Great. Thank you. Colonel Beal?
Chairman Lilly, Commissioners, to caveat on what Jared just said a minute ago, by the way, I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Business and Revenue Operations for the agency. So to caveat on what Jared just covered, and in keeping with the governor's direction to reopen Texas and to get the Texas economy moving forward again, I'm going to discuss those very specific actions that TABC is taking to that very end. So on this first slide, you're going to see we're continuing Governor Abbott's waivers. There's about 7 of those. We're also continuing 9 process changes that we have made within TABC to facilitate that. One example of those is we're now expediting the processing of delivery permit applications, both consumer delivery permits and beverage cartage permits. We're also implementing new efforts to help new businesses start up. For example, and an example of that is that we're continuing to accept electronic signatures of the applicants and local officials on applications. And used to, you couldn't do that. And this is easing our customers' requirements to obtain an in-person wet signature by local officials, because they just can't do that now since most of the courthouses are closed. So we've eased that restriction. We're also implementing new efforts to help existing businesses amend operations so that they can navigate the new dynamics. Next slide, please. Under licensing application process, we're continuing to allow for electronic submissions, which we didn't do before. So that's moving the process along much quicker. We're also expediting processing and issuing at the request of the applicant. So if they come in and they want us to move it a little bit faster, we'll do that. We also looked at the extension of expiration of seller server certifications, which will be covered by general counsel in just a few minutes. And under our business operations, we're continuing to provide penalty relief and social distancing procedures for retailers and wholesale transactions. We're continuing to defer the excise tax payments on a case-by-case basis. And we're helping businesses change their permit types as necessary as they reopen. We're helping businesses re-diagram their license areas to assure that they can remain in compliance. And Chairman Lilly, I'd just like to throw in one little caveat here is that, you know, our dedicated and professional employees throughout the agency, but especially in tax marketing, port of entry, and licensing, which is my divisions, they've done yeoman work during this time, and they in fact deserve a hearty Bravo Zulu, and you gave it to them at the beginning of this, and I sincerely appreciate that. So with that concludes my remarks. I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioners, any questions or comments for Colonel Beal? Colonel Beal, absolutely. A lot of your people are some of the unsung heroes of the agency who work tirelessly behind the scenes to keep the trains running on time, as it's often referred. And so an absolute hearty slap on the back, job well done, hooah, hoorah, whatever, etc. for all your people, and thank you very much for your dedication, Colonel Beal. And so with that, we're going to go to the next agenda item, which is very exciting. Director Raymond is going to discuss the potential action on approval of the draft of the TABC strategic plan for fiscal years 2021 through 2025. Director Raymond.
Good afternoon, Chairman Lilly and Commissioners. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Great. To reiterate, my name is Nick Raymond, Director of Government Relations at TABC. Today I'm going to provide an overview of the agency's draft strategic plan for fiscal years 2021-2025. Next slide. Before I begin, I'd like to point out that all state agencies are required by law to develop a 5-year strategic plan to ensure state agencies have an effective long-range plan that maximizes the efficient use of state resources in service to achieve the agency's core mission. These plans are submitted to the Legislative Budget Board and the Governor's Office in even-numbered years prior to the upcoming legislative session. The strategic plan sets the direction for all the agency operations, and it's the formal document that communicates our efforts not only to the legislator, but to all TABC employees, industry members, and the public. Next slide. The four goals of our strategic plan may look familiar, as they are the same priorities brought forth in our March commission meeting. These priorities, now referred to as goals, are essential to the agency's core mission and the future of it. For each goal, there are supporting action items that will guide our divisional programs and the services we provide. The results of these efforts are later considered when shaping the agency's performance measures found in the General Appropriations Act and are a key tool for future planning, resource allocation, and operating decisions. The performance measures of the state agencies are determined by the LBB and the governor's office, so it's important that our strategic plan is comprehensive and results driven. Taking into account all the changes from last session, including the sunset review and the additional appropriated funds, we recommended updates to our performance measures that accurately reflect our core mission. Currently, these final decisions for recommendation are still pending with the Legislative Budget Board. Next slide. Other recommendations in this strategic plan are redundancies and impediments. Here we have an opportunity to identify all service, state statutes, and state rules or regulations applicable to the agency that merit additional executive and legislative review because they often pose barriers to the economic prosperity of Texans and or they create inefficient agency operations. Next slide. The recommendations included in the redundancies and impediments section are specific changes to the Alcoholic Beverage Code and the agency's budget. These barriers and inconsistencies limit our ability to properly regulate control labels and retailers equally, along with maintaining adequate funds to complete large IT infrastructure projects. I'm going to highlight a few of the ones listed here and can answer any questions that follow. As you know, control labels are products that are made by a manufacturer exclusively for a retailer. In essence, the retailer controls the product and no other retailer has access to it for resale. There are thousands of control labels in the marketplace, all of which are prohibited. Enforcing current law in the state is neither feasible nor productive. It would also result in loss of economic activity for these businesses and reduce consumer choice. Because of this, we recommended that the legislature establish specific left and right limits so TABC can efficiently enforce the law equally among all alcoholic beverage types. Other recommendations included here are two riders for our budget. Appropriations limited to revenue collections would allow unexpended balances to transfer within the biennium, which is extremely helpful in managing cash flow for operational expenses, specifically appropriated funds for the technology maintenance, upgrades, and license fees. Furthermore, allowing TABC to promptly respond to the rapidly growing, ever-changing industry and to ensure the current progress we've made in these projects is not limited or stopped. The second rider, Unexpended Balance Authority, UB Authority, would provide the agency the authority to transfer funds to address unexpected one-time purchases necessary to finish projects. Without it, we are at a disadvantage when trying to complete important projects. For example, the upgrades to the licensing software, which will streamline the processes for TABC employees and the industry. Addressing these redundancies and impediments that I've highlighted along with the others in the draft strategic plan will improve the agency's overall performance and necessary to bring us to the next 5 years of the agency. Next slide. Being mindful of certain deadlines set by the LBB, the staff recommends that you all, the commission, approve the draft strategic plan with the caveat that portions of it may change due to the Legislative Budget Board's feedback or because it may be edited for various administrative and non-essential issues. With that, I yield the remainder of my time back to the commission if there are no further questions. It's been a privilege to present this information to you all today.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments regarding the draft proposal of the strategic plan as presented by Director Raymond?
I just have two quick comments. One, and they're really just more clarification. So first of all, very well done. And is there a metrics or anything that is going to be used? And I didn't see it in here. This is why I'm asking, because we have some really lofty goals, which I know we could implement easily, or I say easily, we've got a great team, but the goals are definitely doable. But in order for us to really track what the success of each goal is there any type of data or metric system that we'll be able to look at as y'all go through the process of implementing these very, like I said, strong goals?
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for that question. The performance measures that are currently being considered by the LBB are the matrix of the essential tasks and matrix to effectuate those goals, and more specifically the action items. And once we receive those back, there'll be another opportunity to present the strategic plan in its entirety.
Okay, good. Because a lot of time we want to be best in customer service. We'll be able to streamline and all of those. In order for us to show our success, we'll need to have the hard data, especially going into a legislative session where we're looking at some budget cuts. We want to be able to tell our story moving forward. And then secondly, I just really wanted to make sure that as we look at training, either when it's in human trafficking, especially with our agents, that there is a discussion on whenever we are able to go in and gather information or data that attorney general's offices can use and local district attorney's offices can use, because a lot of times when there is a human trafficking ring or there's activity, sometimes it's hard to get the information back to the DA's office, or at least some of the evidence back that's needed to actually prosecute the case. And so I know we're not in that type of business, but I think if we're all having eyes and ears out there, that if there's an opportunity for us just to maybe be aware of some of that, some of the evidence that we might be able to just see or hear, and make sure that it gets back to the law enforcement that actually can do some of the prosecutions as we move forward. Just a comment.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Nick, I just want to also at every possible opportunity to thank you for all the work that your team has done with government affairs, starting with the last legislative session, going through this whole process. The LBB process is incredibly complex. There's so many hoops we have to jump through, all of which are valid, but they require a lot of tedious, detailed work. And then the not small task of effectively marketing this to the legislature and taking our argument, our cases before the legislature. I know at the appropriate time, I'm going to lean on all the commissioners. All of you have tremendous political connections in your respective areas, and to help us to sort of, wave the TABC flag at the appropriate time. We're going to need a shoulder-to-shoulder effort as we go into the next legislative session. That's going to be probably unlike any effort we've ever had as an agency before. And all of you have been commissioners of other agencies and been involved, as board members of the boards of regents. Commissioner Mack, you know what it's like going before higher ed and trying to get money. Well, it's going to be a big chore for all of us. And so we're going to really ask all the commissioners to lock arms as we get closer to that ultimate goal, because we're doing some great things. And that your question on metrics, Commissioner Marino, is so important. We've been talking about it. We need, specific, verifiable goals and objectives that we can show the legislature to say, this is what we've done, this is what we've accomplished, and this is not the time to cut us back, right? Despite what we're going through. And so, we're all big people and we understand the challenges facing our budget, but having all the commissioners involved is going to be really important as we go into the next session. So, and there's nobody better than to lead that charge than Nick Raymond. So Nick, great job, man.
Thank you, sir.
Really well done.
Thank you.
And so at that, it's time to vote. So I move to approve adoption of the draft strategic plan for fiscal year 2021 through 2025 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
I'll second.
Commissioner Marino with the second. Thank you, ma'am. We will now vote. Votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. Thank you very much. At this time, we'll be taking public comment on agenda items from today's meeting. If you wish to comment on any of these items, please use the chat feature. This is now our third commission meeting in which we have used this chat feature for public comments. Detailed instructions for using the chat feature, as you know, are posted on our agency website, and we will now wait to see if any items are received. And we have General Counsel Clark Smith to read and deal with public comments.
Good afternoon, commissioners and folks from the public who are joining us. So at the onset, I need to provide the caveat that under the Texas Open Meeting Act, we're fairly limited in what we can discuss in open meeting. We appreciate all your comments and questions as they come in. If it's not an item that directly relates to a posted agenda item, we can take it under consideration, but we can't discuss it during the meeting itself. Let me start off with a comment from Mrs. Emily Knight from the Texas Restaurant Association. She states that as you make those calls to restaurants, and I believe this is directed at Director Staples in his presentation, as you make those calls to restaurants, please let us know if you uncover anything where the TRA can be supportive. I really appreciate you doing this. They are hurting and showing amazing resiliency. Mrs. Knight, we take that to heart. Yield the floor to the commissioners if y'all have any thoughts on Mrs. Knight's comment.
No, well said. And the TRA is obviously an incredibly important, powerful, and influential body, and have been instrumental in a lot of the positive changes that we've seen. So anything that we can do to help the cause is important, and I know all the commissioners will take that responsibility seriously and provide any feedback necessary.
I want to say that I'm excited about calling these businesses. I want to thank the chairman for helping us do that. I assume it was your idea, but if it wasn't, whoever had that idea, I want to thank them. That's a good idea. Looking forward to doing it, and I hope to learn a lot from the businesses that I talk to. I'm going to take very seriously what they say, and I hope that it improves our response going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight, for that comment. So we have several other comments which don't deal directly with the posted agenda items, but we do hope to address them. So please reach out to us. I think Director Staples is probably the best contact with any inquiries or thoughts I'll read out those questions and comments now, but again, we're unable to substantively address them. We have a comment from Mutmo asking, what is the state's definition of interactive games as stated in the governor's directive? Again, please reach out to us through Director Staples. Spencer Whalen, the Executive Director of the Texas Whiskey Association, asks for any guidance on offering tours. Again, important question, but since it doesn't directly relate to an agenda item, we can't address it. But Spencer, you know where to reach me. Mrs. Amy Harrison has several questions and comments. She's asked a question about mail quarantine. So 2-day quarantine for mail. I've been advised that mail received in TABC offices must sit for 2 days before it may be handled or opened. Other state agencies are not taking these measures. CDC guidelines do not give these instructions. How long will TABC hold mail for 2 days before opening and sorting? Mrs. Harrison also asks, no drop box. All mail must be paid to be tracked or sent regular mail with days before delivery. Other state agencies have set up drop boxes for their state offices. Is it possible to have a drop box at least at headquarters so applicants may not be out additional funds to ensure receipt of their applications and monies? Mrs. Harrison also has a comment on stakeholder meetings. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the stakeholder meeting held on May 8th as I was assisting clients who are trying their best to keep their businesses alive. I would respectfully point out that stakeholders meetings during a pandemic might not get the participation that is truly needed to discuss rules that might potentially change the way people in this industry do business. Perhaps multiple stakeholders meetings may be held at various times to allow for participation if necessary. And then finally, Mrs. Harrison points out that she reached out to staff requesting participation options for public comments and was told instructions on the web is all that is currently available. Okay, we have a comment from one of our TABC colleagues. This is from Lee Owens. As an employee, I enjoy hearing about the agency and what it's doing within the industry. I hope you continue to allow the meetings to be viewed via Zoom. And then we have an inquiry from Dakota Hazelwood. Dakota is inquiring about slide 40, business recovery. Can you expound on the changes in permit types and rediagramming of licensed areas in or during the reopening post-COVID business operations? I'm not exactly sure who had slide 40. I believe it would have been Director Staples or Deputy Executive Director Beal. But I will yield the floor to the commissioners on any thoughts about how we can best address changes in permit types and how to rediagram businesses. Y'all can imagine that change in circumstances might lead certain businesses to want to expand their patio seating, for instance. If y'all have any thoughts or questions that we can add to the discussion, I yield the floor.
It's a great question, and I would just simply ask that if Director Staples can respond appropriately at an appropriate time, that would be very helpful. But those are excellent points, and it's a great question. Thank you.
And with that, that's all the public comments we've received today.
Very good. And we appreciate everyone for their comments and for their patience in dealing with this new normal, as it were, as it relates to public comment. We are now going to go to the next agenda item, which is consideration and potential action on adoption of amended Rule 41.54, destructions. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Chairman. So this rule, y'all voted to publish it at the March Commission meeting. This is now being proposed for adoption. This rule has to do with the destruction of malt beverages as a result of a natural disaster. This is a timely rule up for adoption. This was put into place well before the COVID pandemic. Subject to any questions, I yield the agenda item for a vote.
I move to approve adoption of amended Rule 41.54 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to the motion?
Second that.
I'll second.
Commissioner Mack? Thank you, sir. I have a second. We will now vote. Sorry. We're good? All right. Motion carries. Thank you. Next agenda item is consideration and potential action on adoption of amended Rule 31.1, separation of duties between commission and executive director. Mr. Smith?
So Rule 31.1, we have published 3 basic types of amendments to this rule. The first regards contested cases. Per the sunset bill from last session, the commission will now be handling the final decision on all contested cases. The second piece has to do with case settlements and who approves of case settlements. Currently, that function is delegated to the executive director. Per the sunset bill, the second amendment to the rule does 2 things. One, it sets a monetary threshold of $10 million. Any proposed settlements above a $10 million mark would now go to y'all for approval. There's also a mechanism for other important types of settlements that maybe don't reach that dollar threshold to go to the commission for final consideration. The final piece of these amendments, it would change the reporting structure for the general counsel's role from the commission to the executive director. Again, this is proposed in order to reflect administrative day-to-day realities. Subject to any questions, I yield the floor to a vote.
Thank you, sir. I move to approve adoption of amended Rule 31.1 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment about the rule. I'm going to vote to approve this rule, but I want to say that the first time I read it, I didn't agree with it. I thought that it was inconsistent with sunset guidance, that the commission be given more oversight rather than less. But I'm going to approve it because I think we have some discretion here. And General Nettles has proven himself to be very, very good at what he does. And every time he's given a responsibility, he's done a great job with it. And he's improved this agency. It's much better than it was when he found it. I do think it's getting better every day. Now with that compliment, with the power that goes with approval of this rule comes more responsibility. That is, we're losing at least one direct report in the eyes and ears that comes with that. And I would hope that General Nettles knows that the next time something bad happens, something stupid happens out somewhere in the agency, next time I do something stupid, the next time there's some kind of crisis brewing, a scandal that might come up, he now has more responsibility to end it and to tell us about it and to keep us informed about those things. And I just want to compliment him on the job he's doing, but say that with that compliment comes some recognition that there's more responsibility and a little bit more danger here, and that I hope that he enters into his new responsibilities and the new reporting structure with that in mind.
Well said, Commissioner Boatright. Thank you. Any other comments? All right. With that, I move to approve. I'm sorry. We're good? All right. I move to approve adoption of amended Rule 31.1 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to the motion?
This is Commissioner Atkins. I'll second.
Thank you, sir. I have a second. We will now vote. Our votes have been recorded. Motion is approved. The next agenda item is consideration and potential action on adoption of amended Rule 50.1. Purpose and authority. Mr. Smith.
For commissioners, this is a adoption. This is really sort of a cleanup ministerial change to Rule 50.1. It's non-substantive. Yield it to you guys for a vote.
I move to approve it. Well, any comments or questions? Having heard none, I move to approve adoption of amended Rule 50.1 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Commissioner Mack, thank you, sir. Our votes have been, or, I beg your pardon, we have a second. We'll now vote. Approved. Next agenda item is consideration and potential action on publication of proposed new Rule 35.7, alcohol delivery compliance software applications. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an enormously important rule. All our rules are important, but this one in particular. This comes from Senate Bill 1450 from last legislative session that created the consumer delivery permit. What this rule does is it sets parameters from TABC for what consumer delivery companies, what their delivery applications, their digital apps have to do. So guidelines for the determination of whether the person receiving the alcohol is 21. Guidelines for GPS determinations of if a delivery area is in an area that's wet or dry for the particular alcohol that's being delivered. This is proposed for publication, which will put it into the public comment period and then prospectively up for adoption at the July Commission meeting.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments? I move to approve publication of proposed new Rule 35.7 as recommended by staff. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. Our vote. We do have a second. We'll now vote. Motion is approved. Thank you all. The next agenda item is an emergency addition to the agenda. Consideration and potential action on adoption of amended Rule 50.28, verification and expiration of certificate. This addition to the agenda is authorized by Texas Government Code Section 551.045. Mr. Smith?
Sure, thank you, Chairman. So this is a emergency rule that has to do with allowing people to get back to work. This addresses the issue of seller server certification expirations. So a seller server certification is what a bartender or waiter or waitress goes through training to receive in order to learn about best approaches for not selling to intoxicated persons or minors. The certifications last for 2 years. There's an enormous part of the service industry whose expirations probably expired in the last 75, 80 days. What this rule will do is it extends the validity of their certification well into August, which enables them to get back to work. You know, if their business is opening up on Friday, they can get back to work on Friday. Again, this is done under an emergency basis because of the COVID epidemic, which provides ample grounds for the emergency rule. Subject to any questions, yield to you guys for a vote.
Thank you. I move to approve adoption of amended Rule 50.28 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to the motion?
This is Commissioner Atkins. I'm going to second. Can I just say, I think this is another just great example of the agency supporting industry during this time. I'm proud to support this rule.
Well said, and I agree wholeheartedly. We have a second. Thank you, Commissioner Atkins. We will now vote. Our votes have been recorded. The motion is approved. The next item is executive session. The commission will now go into executive session under Government Code 551.074 and 551.071. The regular open session of the TABC will be in recess. The time is now 2:36 p.m. Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. right, next is potential action on items discussed in executive session, and no action will be taken.
Time we came back in.
Time is 3:06. And we are in open session, Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. And before I go on, I just want to also give a shout out, if I could, to Joe Ignamo. Joe is not on camera right now. I wonder if we could put you on camera, Joe. Sorry, we can't see you? Okay, sorry. You guys should see what it's like here in Houston. This has been a tremendous effort, basically taking a large conference room and turned it into a studio with studio lights, green screens, flat screens, laptops, and basically Joe is responsible for all that. So Joe, and well, sorry, one guy has to get the credit, right? Anyway, thanks to you and your team. This is a ton of work that you guys had to come here from Austin, set all this up, and we are indebted to you, sir, for your efforts today. Thank you so much for all that you do, both of you guys. Thanks. Next time I need more bass, though, when you video me, so just wondering. All right, so the next is the announcement of the next meeting date. The next regularly scheduled commission meeting date is planned for Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. Commissioners, do you have a problem with that date? All right, should be nice and cool. Neither do I, so the commission is scheduled to meet on Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. Next is adjournment. The time is now 3:08 p.m. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are adjourned. Be safe.